Hey guys, welcome to my channel and to my knitting podcast series. It is wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Samantha and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind the Strikkechick. So apologies in advance for the lighting situation. I don't know if you can tell. I live in Tromsø, which is a city in Norway that is in the Arctic Circle. And what that means is that in the winter months, there is a period of time called mørketida, or the dark time, where we don't get any sunlight. The sun does not come up over the horizon, and that started at the end of November, a couple days ago, as I'm filming this video, and it will end in the middle of January on a day called Soldagen, which actually was the inspiration for my first ever knitwear design. So we are in mørketida right now, which means the sun has not been coming up. And for people who podcast or vlog or do any kind of video content, that isn't exactly ideal. But I have tried to make it a little cozy with some candles, and I have a little bit of Christmas decor and such back there, and so I hope that makes up for it, and I hope that you can still see everything well and enjoy the video regardless. I have a couple friends with me to help me film this video today. This is Charlie the Unicorn and Douglas the Highland Cow from the book Robin, Octopus and Friends by Claire Gelder. I've named this little lady Lula, and I figured Douglas was a really cute name for the Highland Cow, so I'm just going to keep it. And these are Christmas presents for my nibblings, my little niece and nephew who live in Copenhagen. And I am planning on sending them out before the next podcast airs. So even though this episode isn't a traditional finished object, works in progress acquisitions video, I figured I wanted to give you guys a chance to say hello to these little guys before they find their new home. And I knit them up in, I think the pattern book calls for Claire Gelder's own yarn, which is, it's like a cheeky chunky, it's a 100% wool yarn, but I chose to make these in Hobby Amigo Chunky, which is also meant to be knit up on 7mm needles, but it is a 100% acrylic yarn. So it's a little bit easier to wash and to take care of, which is good when you're knitting for children, so I figured my cousins would appreciate that a bit. But yeah, these were so much fun to make, and I am so excited to see their reactions when they get their new Christmas presents in the mail. And then speaking of Christmas, I have on a very Christmassy sweater today, I think. This is my strand sweater. And if you have watched my channel for a while and you've seen my 24-hour knitting challenge video, it's from the summer when I was a victim of the SAS strike that was happening in Europe, and I was stranded in Oslo because there were no flights within Norway with SAS. It was only SAS Connect flying from different cities around Europe, kind of internationally, and not so much domestic SAS. And the only option I had to get home was to take a 26-hour bus ride from Oslo to Tromsø. And I went yarn shopping, so I bought, this is Sandnes Garn Peer Gynt and Sandnes Garn Tin Silk Mohair in the shade Jelly Bean Green. And I picked that up at a very cute little yarn shop called Strikkechick in Oslo. And I knit this sweater on the bus ride back home, and testers have finished making wonderful versions in all different colors and yarns, and thanks to their help, I have released the pattern. So if you want to make your own strand sweater with me, minus the unfortunate bus experience, I hope you are never afflicted by any kind of travel nightmare of that sort, you can feel free to check out the link to the pattern, and we can have matching sweaters. And it's actually a very fast to knit sweater, so I think if you knit it in like a Christmassy shade, like I think this green is very Christmassy, then it's perfect for a very nice, warm, seasonally festive Christmas sweater. So without further ado, what I wanted to do, because it's getting to the end of 2022, I wanted to do a little bit of a yarn inventory and see what I have in my stash and what I kind of have project ideas for and what I have, but inspiration hasn't quite hit me yet. So I have my entire yarn stash out here that you guys see because it's out of frame, but I will show you each yarn individually. And this is just my untouched yarn stash. This is not my leftover yarn stash. I have a couple videos where I have documented and logged and filed, like the kind of type A person that I am, all of the yarn in my leftover stash, which has grown since I filmed that video, but I think it's a pretty good overview of the yarn that I have there. And I haven't showed you guys the like working yarn that I have for different projects. So that is what I wanted to do today, and I wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about the yarn and about the project that I had in mind for it, and just like some notes and comments and just, I don't know, things that I like about it, things I don't like if I've worked with it before, and just a little bit chatty and informal. So yeah, if you're here for a yarny video, that's what we're doing today. So let's get into things. The first, and this of course, this is in no specific order because I've seen some people very meticulously organize their yarn stash by weight, by color, by fiber. I just kind of have it all here, and I have like an Excel sheet or a list where I document everything out, and I think that's my way of keeping track of things, so that's what I prefer to do. So that's how I'm presenting it to you. There's no specific order of things. It's just whatever I grab first, and we'll talk about that. So the first yarn that I have is Drops Air, and I've shown you guys this recently. This is the color Bluebird. It's one of their new shades, and I just picked it up during the Drops annual sale. So this was a bit of a impulse buy, a very recent impulse buy, and I have 6 skeins of it. So it's enough for a sweater quantity for me, but inspiration hasn't hit with this one yet. So it is sitting in my stash until I figure out a potential project for it, but it will definitely be a sweater, I think. And I don't think I want to hold this with any kind of silk mohair or alpaca or anything else like a follow thread. I think I just want to have this Drops Air by itself because it is just such a pretty color. I think actually the lighting is kind of bad, but it is picking up the color pretty true to what it actually is, so that's pretty nice. So that is the first yarn in my stash, and you will see a lot of Drops Air today because I do buy a lot of Drops yarn and a lot of Drops Air specifically just because I love how soft it feels and I love how versatile it is. And pretty much the only thing that I have a complaint about is that structural knits and cables and such don't pop as much in Drops Air as they do other yarns. But I mean, when you're looking at the price point and the softness of the yarn and just overall how good it feels to wear, I think that's something I can overlook because this is such nice yarn. So that is the first yarn in my stash, and I also have a little bit of this Lina Langmore Påfugl, which is now called, there's a little bit of stuff in here. I thought there was a little bit of dirt, but there's not, it's fine. It is now called Myk Påfugl by Dalegarn, which is a Norwegian yarn manufacturer. And I have 5 skeins of this, and I am thinking about using them to knit the Fashionably Lace sweater, the light edition by Kara Knits Eng, or Kara's Knit Eng, yes. Kara's Knit Eng, sorry. I'm thinking about knitting the Fashionably Lace sweater from her that she very graciously gifted as a free pattern after I test knit the Drop It Like It's Hot cardigan for her. So yeah, I think that would look really nice. It's the right weight. It's a chunky mohair, kind of like Take Care mohair from Wool and the Gang, and then hip wool fluff from hip wool. It's one of those very standard, it's got a little bit of a wool core, and then it's got mohair fluff on the outside. So it's a bit of a thicker mohair yarn that you can use on 7 to 9 millimeter needles instead of using it as a follow thread for another kind of yarn, which is a very interesting type of mohair, and I have used a little bit more recently. I actually have a cardigan design in this that you may have seen that is yet to be named, but this is actually left over from that, but I had like a sweater's quantity of mohair left over from my cardigan, so it's going to become another sweater. The next yarn that I have to show you is this. Du Stora Alpaka Mirasol, which is a 100%, is this focusing? There. Yes, I think this is good. It's a 100% alpaca yarn, and it's in the color 2032, and I'll put up what that actually means in the little yarn boxes that show up in the corners. But it's a very it's a dusty, purpley blue, very, very soft alpaca yarn, as you would expect from a 100% alpaca yarn. Very bouncy, very warm, and I have 7 skeins of this in my stash, and I was going to use it to make a sweater, and then one of you actually in the video where I showed you this as a recent acquisition said that I should not knit it as a sweater by itself because alpaca yarn does grow quite a bit, and if I do knit it as a sweater, then I should use a follow thread, like a silk mohair thread, and I don't really want to do that. I just like this color so much. I don't want any, and I don't think I can find a silk mohair that's exactly the same shade. So I think I just want to do this by itself. And so I had a new idea. I want to knit a shawl, my first ever shawl, with this Du Stora Alpaka Mirasol in this lilac-y lavender blue. Because I'm not a shawl knitter. I've never knit a shawl before. I've never gravitated towards shawls. But recently I've been watching a lot of podcasts from Vollenvine, Kristen of Vollenvine, and also the lovely Amy Polko of A Meaningful Stitch. And I love how their shawls look when they kind of wrap them like scarves kind of, and they look like just really warm, really comfortable scarves for winter. And I could really use one of those because I have one blanket scarf that I bought commercially, and my wool scarves that I've knit for myself are a little bit skinnier. So they're hard to kind of, bunch up and make your chin warm too. And you definitely need that in the Arctic Circle. It has been freezing here, you guys. Speaking of freezing, I have a fun little video at the end of this podcast if you wanna see some frozen lake Arctic winter wonderland adventures. That's what I was doing yesterday. I was taking my my knits out to skate on a very lovely frozen Arctic lake. So that little bloopers at the end. But I definitely do need a shawl to keep me warm underneath my big wool coat, and I think that's what I will be doing with this because it feels so nice, and I can have it right up on my face, and it feels, it doesn't itch at all. So I am going to be I don't have a pattern in mind. If you guys have a nice pattern suggestion for a shawl that is meant to be knit on, what is the recommended needle size? Like 3.5 to 4 millimeter needles with one color. I'm open to lace knits. I love lace. It's just so fun to do for me. And I think that a shawl that big, if you just wrap it around multiple times, it won't really lose its heat just because it's lace knit. So if you have shawl recommendations, please leave them down below, and I would love to make my first one. The next yarn that I have to show you guys, I'm trying to I keep saying the next yarn. I'm trying not to do that, but I have this yarn that I've had in my stash for quite a bit. This is Drops Air, again, and this is actually picking up a bit yellower than it actually is in real life. It's more of a purplish, pinkish kind of, it's like a magenta. It's not so red. It looks a bit redder. But this is in the color 23. And again, I'll put up what that actually is. But I have 7 skeins of this in my stash, and that is a sweater quantity's worth of Drops Air. And I actually bought this before I even started designing knitwear, thinking I'm gonna make my first design with this, and I ended up gravitating towards the yellow drop soft tweed and kid silk instead to make the soul dog sweater. So I still have this in my stash because I haven't quite figured out what to make with it. I definitely want to design something with it because that is the purpose for which it was bought. And so I want to kind of use it for that. But again, the inspiration just hasn't quite struck me. And so until then, it will be in my stash. And I feel like these things are very sporadic. I just had a sweater idea for the Cardiff Cashmere Classic that I've had in my stash for almost a year now. And that is kind of it. I've had some ideas for it, and none of them were kind of like, oh, that's the one. But then I had it and I was like, yes, that. So I don't really think there's a problem with me keeping yarn in my stash for very extended periods of time, because when the inspiration hits, it hits, and then the sweater is done in like 2 months. So I don't think it's, I mean, when I was writing everything down, it does seem like I have a lot of yarn, but I don't actually think any of it goes to waste. It does all end up being knit up, and I do really enjoy working with it and wearing the finished garments all the time, because I wear my knits year round. So it always helps to have this yarn in my stash. That being said, I'm going to try not to buy any more for the time being, because it is quite a bit of yarn. I also have, you've seen this on the Drops Yarn Haul video that I did recently. I picked up some Drops Flora in the shade, I think it's just green. It's the color 15. And it's just a very pretty kind of, let's see if this focuses. Yes. Oh, the camera's a little bit away from me, so I'm kind of like working out my arms, which are a bit sore from all the falling I did yesterday when I was skating. But this is yarn that I was going to use to knit my first ever pair of socks. But some of you let me know, thank you, because I am not a sock knitter, I have never knit socks before, that you should not use wool that is, what is this? This is alpaca, 65% wool, 35% alpaca. There's no nylon in it, so a lot of people said to avoid it for socks and to go with something like Drops Nord instead, which does have a little bit of, I think it's either nylon or polyamide. And so I figured I will repurpose this yarn. I will not make socks with it, and I will make a cable knit beanie, because I have a cable knit beanie that I made. I knitted in the flat with Drops Charisma a year ago in white yarn, and I did just about everything wrong on that hat. I knit it too big. I knit it in white yarn, and then I wore it around campfires. And if you don't know, when the ash and the smoke from a campfire like starts to blow over your head, it stains the top of the beanie. So I have a white beanie with a yellow head, and it just does not look good. And then I tried to wash it by hand, and it's superwash yarn, so it just, and then, I mean, it was already a little too big, and after that it was just unwearable. The yarn is unsalvageable because it's yellow on top. And then I knit it flat because I didn't know how to knit in the round yet. This was back in 2020. And yeah, just there were so many things about that went wrong, but I really did love that cable and rib pattern. So I think I want to make another one the right way in this yarn, like a variation on it, because it doesn't quite meet the gauge of the pattern I was using back then. And again, that pattern is knit flat and I wanted it in the round. So I will be making a cable knit beanie out of these. And I've been making a lot of beanies recently. I think it's because I cut my hair short in August. It's been a while, I need another haircut, but I cut it in August. And before that I had hair that was almost down to my waist, and I couldn't wear beanies. It just didn't look good on me. And now it looks kind of cute. So I've been making a lot of hats recently. I'm trying to get out the yarn that I haven't shown you. Oh, and then we have this, which is also Drops Air. And the one that I showed you before actually was not the magenta shade, that was coral. This is the magenta shade. I'm just sitting in such bad lighting that they looked the same. Mudkatid problems, you guys. But this is the one that I was going to make, that sweater that I talked about, the design that hasn't quite hit me yet. And this is yarn that has not been in my stash for so long. I acquired it during the Drops alpaca sale. Was it the alpaca sale? I think so. The 40% off sale that they were doing earlier. And I have 5 skeins of this, and it is to knit the Saleya vest, which is one of my designs for my mom. Which is a little bit, it's kind of funny, right? Because the whole kind of inspiration for the Saleya vest was that she wanted a vest with buttons, and one of my co-workers suggested buttons on the sides, and so I designed a vest with buttons on the sides. And then I showed my mom my website when I went back to the States to visit my parents this past summer, and she gravitated towards the Saleya vest, and she really wanted one for herself, and I was like, okay, how can I say no to this when you were the design inspiration for it? So I am making her a Saleya vest with this coral yarn, and I will be making myself a sweater design of some sort with the 7 skeins of this yarn that I have. This is in the colorway 14. So I think this is more like a raspberry kind of color, and this is red coral. If you can even see the difference in this light. This looks redder, right? I'm not going completely crazy. This one looks redder, and this one looks more purple. And then I have these 2 fun little skeins of Drops Merino Extra Fine. So this olive shade is in the color 41, and this greenish shade is in the color 31. And I've had these in my stash since last Christmas. And these actually, oh, bless Kevin, because he didn't knit them. And he bought these for me for Christmas along with a little pattern for a dinosaur stuffy, because he thought, he's like, oh, this is so cute. The dinosaur stuffy was crochet. So I have the pattern, I have the yarn. I have just recently gotten into crocheting granny squares. So I could potentially tackle this at some point when I feel like a little bit of a challenge and taking a break from knitting. I do have the right size crochet hook with me now, that it is going to become, I think, a Drops design pattern. I'll leave the link below. It's to like a little happy dinosaur that looks absolutely adorable, and I do want to make it. So I will be using these skeins to make that little dinosaur. But it's just so funny that he tried to buy me knitting related present and he bought me a crochet kit. But yeah, I'll be using these to make a little crochet dinosaur. And then I have these really pretty little mini cones, which is just a really nice, very deep, very dark blue. I'm gonna hide my face because I feel like it's easier for things to focus when you can't see my face. And this is from the yarn store La Droguerie, which I went to when I went vacationing in Nice. And it's called Petite Laine à tout faire, which is little wool to do everything with, kind of. So it's like everyday versatile wool. And it is 100% wool. Don't know what kind of wool because it doesn't say. But they recommend 3 to 4 millimeter needles, and I have 115 meters per little cone, and I have 2 little cones like this. So I was thinking about making a hat for Kevin with this yarn because it's a very nice, very warm yarn, and I could use, I think this is okay for 4 millimeter needles. It would make a little bit of a lighter hat, but I think it would be a good summer hat. So where we live, we need summer hats, especially when we go hiking, because the mountains do get a bit windy and chilly, so you need to bring summer hats and summer gloves and summer scarves, and it doesn't really feel like summer at that point, but you know, hey, it's July, so it should. But yeah, I'm gonna make him a little hat with this yarn, so I have that idea already. And then, so we're starting to get to kind of the end of one of these, and I haven't quite touched the other because I want to keep it a little bit organized. I have more yarn that I bought from the Drops 40% off sale that I showed you guys. This is Drops Melody in the color Sea Green, which is just a really nice, like, it's a brushed alpaca, I think. Let's see. It is 71% alpaca, 25% wool, 4% polyamide. So it is mostly alpaca, so it's kind of like a thicker version of the Drops brushed alpaca silk, which I also have and will show you. But I have 4 skeins of this, and I want to knit the To Be So Lonely sweater by Kara's Knitting, which is the other free pattern that she gifted me for knitting the Drop It Like It's Hot cardigan test. And I meant to buy this in their new light blue shade, but I accidentally bought it in their sea green, the colorway 09. But I think it'll look lovely in this color too, so I didn't bother exchanging it. I was like, well, you know, it'll be a nice sweater either way. So I'm gonna knit it in this, and I have just enough yarn to do that, I think. I did not want to buy extra and then put more in my leftover yarn stash, because that drawer is enormous at this point. I don't know if you've seen it in the video. It's growing and growing, and I'm like, oh, I have to do something with these yarns. But it's so hard because there's so many little bobs and ends, and we'll figure something out. It'll be okay. And then I have this combination of Drops Air in the shade Purple Haze and Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in the colorway 17. It's like a lavender shade. And I'm planning on holding these together to knit the Christiane's Fiengenser pattern by Annette Opheim, who is a Danish designer, I want to say. Danish or Norwegian, I'm not quite sure. But she has designed a lot of patterns. She designed the Bølgegenser, which was modeled after the really popular Ghani sweater, and that got a lot of attention. And she also designed a pattern called the Høstgenser, which is like the fall sweater, and that is also modeled after a Ghani pattern. And the Fiengenser is like a light version of the Høstgenser, so it's like a very kind of, it's a lighter fabric, which I think is nice. I don't have a lot of lighter sweaters, not like I would use them very much where I live, but it is nice to have for when we go traveling and to wear on airplanes, because I think airplanes are actually warmer than Tromsø, so if you can believe it. But yeah, I'm gonna hold these together and knit the Fiengenser, and I talked about that in my 10 sweater patterns that I want to knit as well. So this hopefully will be out of my stash soon, because when I put a sweater pattern on that video, I was like, right, these are the most emergent sweaters that I want to knit. And so this one, just because there's so much yarn and it uses such big needles, I'm like, I can get this out of my stash easy. I can make the garment and then start wearing it and clear up some space and not replenish it. I think my goal is to at least clear half my stash before I start buying new yarn. And now we're getting towards the end of this cubby, so I do still have a little bit of really fun yarn left to show you. This is some other beautiful yarn that I picked up when I was in France at La Droguerie. This is their alpaca yarn, their 100% alpaca in the shade Ecru, which is a very nice natural white cream color. I love how when I show you guys these yarns really up close in the camera, you can still see the little friends I have beside me. That's pretty fun. And then I have this beautiful, it's called Nuit Bleu, Night Blue. It's their Plumette yarn, which is their brushed alpaca. And then they have an option where you can hold these together, and they give you like a little card with the gauge and the recommended needle size. So I have 250 grams of this, which is I guess about 5 skeins worth. And I have 100 grams of this, which is, 100 grams of this, which is about 4 skeins worth. So yeah, I think the plan was, I looked at a sweater that they had in their catalog, and that was where I got the recommended yarn amounts from. So I basically just picked up enough to knit a sweater holding these two together, because I think that would be a really pretty marl design. I don't want to unwind them from these really nice cakes and show you guys together, but I think you can kind of picture it. It's a little bit like my Lingen pullover design that I just showed you guys in one of my last episodes, and you'll see at the end because that's what I wore when I went lake skating. But I really like the look of mixing a different colored mohair with a different colored base yarn, and I want to do something like that for this and make a sweater or a cardigan out of it. I'm not entirely sure, but I do have enough to do that, so that will hopefully be coming in 2023. And I also, speaking of hand-dyed really pretty yarns. I have this yarn that has been sitting in my stash since last Christmas. And this is from a Norwegian yarn company called Unique Garn, who makes really lovely yarns. And this is their Luxus Merino in the shade Murgindis. So it is 75%, actually I have the tag here so I can tell you guys exactly what it is. It is 75% extra fine merino wool, 25% silk, and it's superwash merino. And I get 200 meters and 100 grams, and I have 300 grams of this in my stash. So I'm thinking what I want to do is I want to hold it together with a brushed alpaca silk, like this one, and make a really nice sweater out of these two kind of yarns together, because I think that would look really nice. And then I could also use a little bit bigger needles and it would stretch it a bit further. So that is my plan for this, but I'm thinking something that looks very whimsical, very princessy, very kind of, you know, I mean, it's, because look at these colors. It's, like I told my niece, they're unicorn colors, right? It's pink, it's purple, and it sparkles. So, so it's definitely something very girly, very, well, stereotypically girly, very kind of fantastical. That's what I want to make out of this. And inspo will hit me, but you know, I think I just got my idea for the design for the cashmere, which I'll show you that yarn later, even though you've seen it before on some previous video. I forget which one exactly, but I did do it as an acquisition. But yeah, it's like when one idea hits me, it takes a little bit of time before the next one can kind of grow, take root. Yeah. But I'll get into towards the end of this drawer. I have quite a bit of brushed alpaca silk. I have 9 skeins of it in this really nice red shade. So the colorway is 7, but I will put the actual name up. And this was very, very kindly gifted by one of my coworkers who had it in her stash for quite a while, and then she was like, right, I'm not going to use this, do you want to adopt it? And I did. So I'm thinking about holding this double and making just like, I mean, the problem with brushed alpaca silk is that you can't do anything structural, and that's my favorite kind of thing to knit. I love, I mean, I love structured knits. But I can probably make something like a really nice, really classic raglan sweater, maybe a v-neck. I haven't ever designed a v-neck before, so maybe I could do that with like maybe some light cables or just no cables. I mean, maybe some like detailing around the cuffs. I could do like cable ribbing and then have stockinette. That would look kind of cool, or like cable raglans and then just leave it at that. And just keep it a little bit more low-key this time. But yeah, I have enough for a sweater and probably some extra. So I might even make like a little beanie out of this, because I think this looks nice, right? Like with my black hair, I can make a beanie out of this and it would look good. So yeah, that's my plan for this so far. And then I have this Drops Melody trio. And I have 2 skeins of each one. So I have, this is the shade 04, which I think is their medium gray. And I have the shade 14, which is this kind of light yellow, kind of toned down color. And then I have their mustard or curry or this kind of goldenroddy color, which is the shade 18. So I'm thinking what I want to do with this is like a color block sweater. So I'm thinking I want to do the body in maybe this gray and just make it stockinette and drop shoulder or modified drop shoulder with a little bit of short row shaping. So do this and then do like one of these for each sleeve, and then do the ribbing collar cuff details and like the accented color depending on what is on each sleeve and the body. And the yarn is out of frame, sorry guys. But yeah, I'm thinking that is the plan for these 3 skeins, and that kind of has already taken root. So I haven't made an official pattern, I haven't started knitting, but I do know that that is what I want to do for these 3 skeins. And that brings us to the end of this drawer, and now we have this whole one. So I have, and I've showed you this in my recent acquisitions as well, I have 7 skeins each of these lovely Pearl Soho Kori hanks, which have been discontinued, so they were on a 60% discount. And just, I mean, okay, so can you see the shine? Like, they just are so shiny, and I love it. And like the drape, and I know some people say that they're splitty, and I mean, that obviously I would use metal needles because I think that'll help, but I don't quite mind because I just think they're so gorgeous. The light blue is called Ice Cap Blue, and the darker blue is called Clear Lake Blue, and these are 100% silk mohair. So I want to make a sweater out of each one, and I don't want to hold it with anything else because I love these colors and I love the feel of the yarn and I love the drape and just everything about it, and I want to make a garment out of each. But again, I don't have any ideas just yet, but that's okay. They will come. And I also have from Pearl Soho, which you've seen in the same video, 3 hanks of this understory in the shade Silverberry, which is just a really lovely, really warm, really soft, bouncy wool. It's 50% baby alpaca, 25% baby yak, and 25% silk. And it's just this really, really nice, kind of cool toned brown color. And I'm planning on holding this together, maybe with a strand of silk mohair that kind of brings out the cooler tones, and making a sweater, just a very simple raglan sweater design out of this. Or a circular yoke, I don't know. It's in the air, but I want it to be a really simple top-down sweater design with this yarn and with some silk mohair held with it, because it's just, it's so lovely. I love this. And I also, moving into kind of my more commercially available yarns, I have, to reach a bit because this is out of frame, I have 4 skeins of each of these, which are also, like I showed you the Donegarn Peacock earlier in the video, and these are also Donegarn Peacock, the 100% silk mohair, kind of thick. This is in the shade, and these obviously, these don't correspond to Meek Poifu, which is their new yarn. This is the Lina Langmo brand, which is discontinued now, so it was on a pretty steep discount, which is why I bought it. This is shade 4612. It's a very kind of, it's a little bit brighter than a baby pink, but it's not quite a hot pink, and it is upside down. I will show you the right way up. Yeah, that's this color. And this is a kind of lemony yellow. Really pretty. And I'm going to make the poppy sweater, which is a design by Lina Langmo, that she holds these together, and it's kind of a bit of a gradient. You knit a little bit in the pink, and then you knit with both yarns together, and then you knit with the yellow. And she used the same colors in her sample, and both of the yarns together makes a really pretty kind of mango orange. And it looks like colors of the sunset when you then look at the whole sweater, and that is just so pretty to me. So I want to do exactly the same color she did and hold these together and make a poppy sweater. The only modification I'm going to make is that she knit her sweater flat and I want to knit mine in the round. So I'm just going to modify her instructions so I can knit in the round instead. And I also have yarn for the first pattern I'm going to show you that isn't actually a sweater pattern. I have these 2. So I have 2 skeins of Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in the shade 5. So it's like a medium brown, kind of chocolatey brown, really pretty. And I have 2 skeins of Sandnes Garn Fritidsgarn in the shade 3161. So this is also a really nice medium brown. And I want to hold these together and make a pair of mittens. And I don't have a mitten, I don't want to design these mittens because I just designed the glacier mittens and I loved that process, but I think my mitten mojo is a bit done. It's run out for the time being. But I really want to make a nice pair of warm mittens with these. And so I think together they would knit best on a pair of 6mm needles, 6 to 6.5. So I'm going to look specifically for knitting patterns with that needle size and knit something, maybe with a little bit of a simple design with these two together. And I think they would make a really nice neutral pair of really warm mittens, because this is 100% new Norwegian wool. And this is 77% alpaca and 23% silk. So together they will be very, very nice and warm. And I can wear them when I am northern light spotting or skating or enjoying the nice silver lining-y bits of living in the Arctic Circle in the dead of winter. Because that is what my knitting wardrobe now is starting to kind of consider, right? Is like, I enjoy being outside, but it is very frequently -10. And you really, really have to bundle up and be nice and warm when it's like that. So we're getting to the end. The light at the end of the tunnel, it is near. And I have this yarn to show you. I've got 7 skeins of Baby Merino by Marinor in the color 140, which is this kind of honey mustard kind of yellow. It's picking up a bit warmer than it actually is, but it's like, it's a bit less orangey than it's showing up. And then I have 2 skeins of Marinor Baby Merino in the color 005, which I think is their white. It's not off-white, it's like an actual white. And these are for the Paulingenser by Garnius, which I bought as a yarn pack, actually. I bought the yarn specifically for that sweater with the pattern. And I bought that before I had ever actually knit a sweater, because I was very overconfident. And I thought, I can buy this pattern, I can buy this yarn, and I can knit a sweater in Norwegian, even though I did not speak Norwegian yet. And I can knit a sweater in raglan, even though I had no idea what a raglan was. And so I'm very happy I didn't try to just go for it at that point, because I think I would have been very disheartened. But now I can certainly knit this. It's just about finding the time to knit Strikkechick Island on the body of the sleeves and everything. So I think when I have a bunch of projects on my needles already. I'll show you some progress on them in the next video, like the Innis skirt and the Lillehammer 94 sweater that I've been working on for quite some time, and I want to get those kind of cleared off my needles before I cast on anything else that will live there rent-free for quite a bit of time, like this sweater, for example. But I will make it. It will be a new forever project. So, coming to the end, and I have to really reach to get this one because there was only so much space around me. Oh man! I have some Knitting for Olive double soft merino, which very sadly has been discontinued, but it is a really lovely, really nice blow yarn. It's kind of like Drops Air. It feels a bit like it, but it is 100% organic merino. And this is in the shade Flamingo, and I have 8 skeins of it, and I want to use it to knit the Augustone's number 11, her kind of tunic dress. Because I think it's just a really pretty pattern. I don't want to knit it as a tunic, I want to knit it as an actual dress. My only issue is that the smallest bust size she's written for is 80 centimeters and I am 73. So I'm hoping if I just kind of like size down a needle, that should be enough, hopefully, because you do hold this with a strand of silk mohair, but then she has you knit on 10mm needles. And I'm thinking if I just size down to 9, maybe that will be enough of a difference where it fits me okay. Because I don't want a lot of positive ease at my bust with that design. I think it would look a bit off. But yeah, that is the plan for this, is to buy, and I think I'm going to buy some white mohair to hold with this, because it is quite a bright pink, and I want to tone it down just a little bit so it can be like a nice, airy, romantic, soft, comfy dress that I can wear. Maybe for Valentine's Day. That was my plan that I said in the patterns that I want to knit this fall/winter. So yeah, I'm hoping I can have that ready for then. And now we're getting close to the end. I have yarn in boxes because they won't fit in my stash. Guys, this is a real problem. And I'm sorry about the crinkling. They're still in the original wrapping. This is hip wool from the Hip Knit shop in the shade New Magic Green, which is actually not that green. It's quite a bit turquoise. It looks almost like a petrol blue. It's just a little bit greener than a petrol blue. And it is 100% wool. It's 80 meters and 50 grams, and I want to say 8 skeins. Yeah, no, I have 10 skeins. I have 10 skeins of this. So it's enough for a sweater, which is what I'm planning on doing with it. But I don't know if I want to hold mohair with it or not. Because, I mean, somebody actually, I think when I first showed you guys this wool on my podcast, someone said that when you knit with, this isn't unspun wool, it's single ply wool. So someone mentioned that it has the potential to kind of lean the stitches if you're knitting round. And so if you knit flat and you seam together, it takes care of that problem. But I do not like seaming. So I'm thinking what I might do to fix that is just buy some mohair that is in the ballpark of this color, because I don't mind if there's a little bit of fluctuation in the colors. I think having a really nice foresty green with this would actually look quite nice, and even these colors together would look quite nice. Look like a jelly bean green and a magic green. That would look nice. So I think I'll just buy a kid silk that kind of matches this and knit a sweater with these together. But I don't know what yet. Again, design inspiration takes its sweet time. But yes, that is my box of hip wool. And I also have my lovely box of Cardiff cashmere, and I probably will never throw away the box because I love it so much. But I do have 10 skeins of Cardiff Cashmere Classic, which is the softest yarn I have ever felt in my entire life, you guys. It's so nice. This is in the shade 572. It's a little bit of a brown and cream kind of marl. And I think, I still have to swatch and everything, but I think I have the perfect idea for a sweater design for this. Just a really nice classic stockinette sweater with some really, really nice details on the collar. No, not the collar. The ribbing for the sleeves and the body. And I don't want to give it away in case my idea doesn't work out as I've planned, but oh my gosh, if it does, I am going to be so, so excited. I cannot wait to show you guys when it gets going. So yeah, this is my Cardiff cashmere. That will be the next design that I cast on after I am done with my air pullover, which I will show you on the next podcast because that has been growing like nuts. And I don't think I've ever actually showed you guys a work in progress or a finished object or the idea or anything. So I will hold myself accountable. I will show you, I promise. But yeah, that is it for my yarn. That's a lot of yarn. It really kind of opens your eyes, doesn't it? Because as I was making this list today and I was kind of getting ready for this podcast, and I just looked over at Kevin and I was like, do not let me buy more yarn. I am good. I have enough. I do not need any. I mean, half the things, I think most of the things I mentioned to you guys, I was like, oh, I want to design something with this, and oh, I want to design something with that. And if I keep buying yarn, then all this yarn I have for design ideas, it will never quite hit because I'll always have new and shiny material to work with. So I don't know, I feel so excited about what is in my stash right now, and I'm like, right, the masterpiece, as it were, is complete. So I think I'll be working from here from now on, unless the exception is if I travel somewhere, like we are planning on maybe doing a Japan trip next year, and if we go to Japan, I am allowed to buy the Japanese yarn. But what I cannot do is just keep buying drops yarn when I have oodles and oodles of it stretched out in front of me. So far that I can't even reach it all, you guys. I have to woo around to get to it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed seeing what was in my yarn stash. I hope I didn't give you too many ideas for buying yarn. I know that I do get peer pressured sometimes in the lightest possible way by other podcasters when they show me their yarn. And I'm like, oh, I want that. But yeah, love your stash, appreciate your stash. I certainly do. Yeah, I am just so, so happy that you joined me today on my little stash exploration tour. And Lula and Douglas are also very happy to have you here. If you want to see more content like this and my works in progress, my finished objects, my design inspiration, I talk about a whole bunch of things, life in the Arctic. I like to interject little funny quips here and there about it for your viewing pleasure and also for my mental sanity. So yeah, like this video, subscribe, leave a comment if you're interested. If you want to come over and say hi to me, I am over on Instagram and Ravelry and TikTok as the Strikkechick. And you can also find me on my own website, thestrikkechick.com. So until next time, send me all your sunniest vibes, and I hope you have some happy knitting. Bye!